Vince. They're really cracking down on safety belts these days.
What's up, officer?
I'm giving you a ticket for committing an 811.
Safety belt violation.
Compliments of Barney Fife.
We never wear safety belts. We're dummies.
Weisenheimers.
He gave us a ticket.
Man's got to do what he's got to do.
And welcome to another Road to Recovery show here. Thank you for joining us. The show that provides hope and help and wholeness and healing for those who are struggling with addiction, or maybe a family member or friend who's going through the journey of addiction as well. There is hope. There is help for you. There are so many qualified, trained people ready, waiting, willing, wanting to help those who are struggling. And so we encourage you to contact the Recovery Center, 687-4500. You can stop by their office, 201 South Columbus Street, downtown Lancaster. They would love to offer that hope and help and healing and support for you. Steve Rao is my name. I have the privilege of co-hosting this show with Tricia Farrar. Welcome back to Road to Recovery.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here, and you remembered my name.
I did. I've been practicing all morning, so it is a privilege to have you joining us. It really is an opportunity to help, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it's wonderful to hear all of the different aspects of drug addiction and prevention in our community, and all of the people that are working together to make our, keep our community safe and healthy. So,
no question. You have invited a special guest to be with us today, and who is our guest today?
Our guest today is a longtime friend of mine and also a co-worker, Keith Tremblay. So thanks for coming, Keith.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, and Keith has a long background in our field of working especially with women and children, and I think it'd be good if you'd tell us a little bit about his background.
Okay.
Would you share that?
Well, we'll do it kind of in reverse. I've been at the Recovery Center for almost 5 years. Coming up on December, it'll be 5 years there. I work there with the Women's Intensive Program, so we have women 9-10 hours a week where we're working on really kind of changing some of those patterns that have been developing through their life. I also, part of the reason I was brought to the Recovery Center was to start a program working with the kids of people who have addiction in their family, because the parents have been through a lot, the kids have been through a lot, and as the parents start to get healthy, the kids need to do some healing too. The kids need to start to change some of those patterns and some of those things that they've been dealing with. So we've started that program, and it's been nice because we've been able to work with the kids, me working with the kids, someone else working with the parents, and putting the whole family kind of back together in a way that's more functional and more healthy, so it can just keep moving in a good direction. For the years before I was at the Recovery Center, I worked at the Lighthouse, the domestic violence shelter, and was there for about 15 years, working as a child and adolescent counselor. So mostly in shelter with the families that were living there. And then before that, did some group homes and institutions and those kind of things. So
there seems to be a connection between the Lighthouse, domestic violence, and addiction. I'm sure you've seen that pattern there.
Yeah, I think when I started working with the kids, the transfer between working with families that had abuse as their primary issue and substance abuse as their primary issue, it's all, especially from a kid's perspective, just that kind of underlying dysfunction that kids are growing up in that are having to deal with. So it's, the overlap is very much there. I don't think one causes the other, but I think the interrelationship between the two is very significant. And I think if you're going to treat one, you need to treat the other, because you can't get a healthy family until you treat all the different issues that are going on.
Seems to me that you're trying to break a generational cycle there. Let me see, 15 years at the Lighthouse, 5 years at the Recovery Center. You may begin to see a second generation. You must have started as a 10-year-old, but you may be beginning to see a second generation. Is that part of your experience?
I've actually gotten calls from parents that I knew as kids that are now coming back, and I've gotten calls from adults that I talked to as kids, and now they're dealing with substance abuse, and so they're just kind of hunting me down where I am. And so it's been interesting to see, but it also kind of gives me a more longitudinal kind of perspective of how this develops and where it goes. So that makes it interesting for me to just see where it's coming from, and so we can look at what we need to do to kind of derail it somewhere.
And you've kind of added a whole new spectrum to the Recovery Center with the services that we provide there, because before you came, we didn't work with young children, and I don't think most people think of the Recovery Center as a family center where little kids come.
Yeah, and some of my youngest clients are 4 and 5 because the effects of domestic violence, of substance abuse, untreated mental illness, I mean, start from pretty much birth. I mean, you're starting to learn some really unhealthy things about the world, and that gets so ingrained in you. So if you're going to become healthy, you need to start. When we look at the clients that we work with, the adults, they didn't start using when they were 25. They didn't start using when they were 50. I spoke to someone last week. I was 9. I started using with my family. I learned this is the way the world is, and so we need to catch them as early as we can to start intervening with that.
My wife is a social worker by degree, and she said that sometimes families that are in addiction are blessed to go down the road to recovery and are in recovery. Sometimes the children affected by that almost wish that their family was back into addiction because it developed a norm for them, and now they've got this new normal that they don't understand. Do you see this kind of pattern?
Oh, absolutely. When you're in addiction, there's all of these rules about you don't trust other people, you don't talk about what's going on, you don't deal with feelings, you don't have to cope with stuff, you just kind of shut down. And it becomes the norm. The world's this unsafe place and we don't deal with anything. We just kind of go into ourselves and struggle and just suffer. And then you start to get into treatment and we say, all right, now we're going to talk about stuff. Now we're going to learn to deal with feelings. Now we're going to face problems head on. Now we're going to have parents that set rules, and we're going to have limits, and we're going to start teaching boundaries, and we're going to make you deal with stuff. And that's hard. They've learned a set of coping skills that work very, very well to keep them safe as best they can within a really dysfunctional system. And those skills serve them well, and to ask them to give them up. I've been taking care of my younger siblings since I was 5 years old. I was the one that fed them. So now I'm going to ask you to be a kid. No idea how to do that.
Right.
So you're really teaching them a whole new way to be in the world, and it is not easy because the old way worked for them in a really messed up, very dysfunctional way.
Right.
It at least kept them safe, and now we're asking them to do some pretty scary things.
So how do you work with a 4 or 5-year-old? What do you do in a counseling session?
I believe people don't get better unless it's in relationship. I really, really believe that, because addictive families, unhealthy families, dysfunctional families are such a closed system. We have one view of reality, and we are locked into it, and we don't trust anybody out there. We don't talk about what's going on. So with the young kids, you're starting to get into relationships. You're starting to get them to trust you a little bit, which even that is a huge step. You're starting to teach them some skills about how to talk about things, how to share things, how to understand their own feelings. I do a lot of play therapy where we're using dolls and working on family systems. I do a lot of just kind of games that are around getting to understand themselves better, learning how to be upset, and instead of freaking out or shutting down, just deal with it. So there's really basic things. Like some of my favorite moments are when a kid will for the first time break something in my office or knock something over and expect things to be crazy or things to be unsafe, and to just go, well, that's a mess. We need to do something about that. Then you start to teach them a different way to see the world, a different way to interact with people, and that maybe they can start to trust, and maybe they can look at some other things, and maybe they can try some things, and maybe the world's not as scary as it feels like it is sometimes. Because there's a lot of rules when you're growing up in this about the way you're supposed to be, and just giving them permission to be different and to try some things sometimes matters. So.
What about safety plans? Do you talk to the young children about how to be safe if the situation at home could get bad?
Safety is probably my buzzword with everything I do. And it comes from a domestic violence, working with abuse for a long, long time. I will never ask a kid to give up a way that they keep themselves safe until there's something in place there. I'm never going to say to a kid, oh, things are all going to be fine and it's always going to be great and we're not going to have any bumps in the road, because that's not the norm. That's not the way it happens. Recovery is a long process and a lot of work, and there will be some bumps. So you start very early with the kids, teaching them that some of the things that you do are wonderful, and maybe you could try some different stuff, but you have to trust your own gut about when you're feeling safe. And that's the one I work with a lot with adults and with kids, because when you're in a place where you're not respected, where you're not listened to, where you're not like validated at all, you learn to not trust that gut, that internal sense of knowing what's right and wrong. And so safety planning a lot is knowing, all right, I know I'm supposed to talk about things, but that's what he says, but it doesn't feel safe right now. I'm never going to challenge that, because I think kids know what keeps them safe, and you're never going to push them to do something that sounds like it's healthy behavior, but within their dysfunctional pattern isn't. So it's why I like the dollhouse, because we're playing out families, and we're who can you start to ask for help. So when you're with a 5-year-old and she's playing out, this is violence and people are acting out and this is going on, you can start asking questions like, wow, who could we get into this story to help us here?
Right.
And so I have doctors and I have teachers and I have little police officers, and we invite them into the story that we're telling with the kids. And how would you tell this person what you need to know? And I believe in that because in my work I've seen kids that have learned that idea of, I deserve to be safe, which a lot of them didn't believe before we really started talking about it.
Correct.
And I have the right to ask people to help me be safe. And teaching just those two things, if I can get that, everything else is extra for me. That you deserve to be respected. Okay, you deserve to be in an okay place.
Right.
And I've got some neat responses over the years where I've had teachers call me and say, so-and-so's coming to class and he doesn't want to go back home because he's saying things aren't okay there and he doesn't want to be in that anymore. That
you made progress there.
Because it's someone that thinks they deserve to speak up for themselves, and maybe thinks that someone might listen and someone might actually help them. So that's kind of neat.
It is. That's fabulous stuff. Just got a couple of minutes left. We call it Road to Recovery because it is a long journey. You're starting out with a 4 or 5-year-old, and it's not instant gratification. That's kind of what got us into the problem, I guess, in the first place, right? It's a long journey. What do you say to somebody who's in the middle of that journey and they don't know if we're going in the right direction here or if we're ever going to make it to safety and comfort and healing? What do you say to them?
We know what this road leads to. We've seen the path of addiction. We've seen the path of abuse. We know how it's affected you. We've known how it's affected your children. We've seen it. We can map it through your entire generation. This is different. This is scary. This is not something you've seen before. But we've seen people take this path. We know where this leads. And even the women that we work with in group, or the kids that we work with, the families that we work with, they can start to like, wow, I had a really good day. This happened, and I actually was safe enough to notice it. I'm kind of one of those annoying counselors. I make everyone that comes into my office, the first thing I'll ask them is, what did you do fun, interesting, exciting, positive this week? Tell me one thing you did. And I will have clients that said, I spent the last 2 hours, knew you were going to ask me this. But so just to get them, if you pay attention, your life has a lot of positive things going on. A lot of good changes are coming, and you're so wrapped up in all of the chaos that's still going on that you miss them. But when you're doing the right stuff and you're paying attention, there are so many good things that are starting to happen and so many good patterns that are starting to develop that if we could keep building on those, where it could go is just amazing. So.
Well, it takes great people like Keith Tremblay, counselor at the Recovery Center, to make that happen. You've got to be very excited to have Keith on the team making a difference in individuals, families, and children's lives.
We sure are, and Keith makes everything fun for everybody. So.
Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for the commitment you're making to families and individuals, especially children, and we encourage you to keep up the good work.
Well, thanks for having me today.
If anybody wants to call you, can they reach you at the Recovery Center?
Yes.
Give the Recovery Center a call, 687-4500, or you can stop at 201 South Columbus Street, downtown Lancaster. And people like Tricia Farrar and Keith Tremblay are there, ready, willing, able, wanting, qualified to help you along your road to recovery. Thanks for joining us today.
life is full of statistics. Thing is, I could have dropped out of school and become one myself, but I didn't because I had people that believed in me. Here's another statistic. 7,000 students drop out every school day. That's one every 26 seconds. It's time that students know that we believe in them.
Inspire a student and share your message of support at boostup.org.